All my life I've been called the responsible one, which is just another way of saying the one who cleans up everyone else's mess. The kitchen smelled like brewed coffee and burnt toast, my signature Saturday morning contradiction. Sunlight leaked through the blinds and soft lines across the countertop, but there was a heaviness in the air I couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the call I'd just let go to voicemail, or maybe it was what I knew would come next. Mark looked up from his laptop at the kitchen island. "Your mom called again." I nodded, reaching for the kettle. "I know. She left a message." "I know," I repeated a little too quickly. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water into a mug, watching the tea bag swirl like it had somewhere more important to be. I finally pressed play on the voicemail. Her voice came through saccharine as ever. "Hi, sweetheart. Just a tiny favor, could you swing by later and grab the red canvas bag in our trunk? Daddy says we won't have room with the cake and all. It's nothing big, just some papers and things. Thanks, honey. You're a doll." The message ended with a chirpy beep. I stared at the phone like it owed me an explanation. Mark raised an eyebrow. "You're going?" "Of course," I said, as if there were ever any question. "It's just a bag." He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I'd grown used to these requests, small on the surface, but always somehow leading to more. When I was 12, it was picking up Greg from soccer while Mom rested. At 25, it was sorting out Dad's tax documents at midnight the day before the deadline. And now it was red canvas bags with vague contents and zero details. Still, I always said yes. That's what responsible daughters do. I glanced at the calendar stuck to the fridge. June 24th. The big Whitmore anniversary party was next week, and of course everything had to be perfect. 50 years of unshakable love between Evelyn and Harold. And guess who'd be helping orchestrate it all? Claire was always the steady one, a little dull, but steady. I could still hear Mom say it with a fond chuckle in front of guests during Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago, as if being dull was my badge of honor. I carried my tea to the window and looked out at the street. It was quiet, the kind of suburban peace that didn't prepare you for any sudden detours in life. Behind me, Mark closed his laptop. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. My fingers gripped the mug tighter than they needed to. We didn't talk much as we got ready. I packed a small tote bag with a cardigan, Mom's house was always too cold, and sunglasses. The ride to my parents' place took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer in silence. At the driveway, Mom met me at the door with a too-wide smile. "There's my lifesaver," she chirped. She didn't invite me in. She just pointed toward the trunk of Dad's car already popped open. "It's the red one right on top," she said sweetly. "You can't miss it." I smiled back mechanically. "Sure, no problem." The bag was exactly where she said it'd be, red canvas worn at the edges, heavier than I expected. I didn't peek inside. That's not what responsible daughters do. We carry what's handed to us, no questions asked. I thanked her, tossed the bag into the back seat, and drove home. Mark was in the driveway when I pulled in. He opened the car door, eyes scanning the back seat. The red bag sat alone, slouched like it was hiding something. I grabbed it quickly, slinging it over my shoulder with forced ease. "What's in it?" he asked. "Just stuff for the party. Papers. Decorations, maybe," I said, avoiding his eyes. He looked at me, not suspicious exactly, but something quieter. Disappointed, maybe. I forced a smile. "It's just a bag." He didn't return the smile. His voice was soft but firm. "Exactly." The car was full of snacks, cartoons, and kids arguing over seat space, the perfect camouflage for everything about to break. Emma wanted the window seat. Jake claimed he had it first. Sophie, wedged in the middle, screamed louder than both of them. I turned the volume up on the iPad playing Moana and tried to keep my eyes on the road. It was early enough that the interstate wasn't yet crowded. Interstate 190 rolled out before us like a lazy ribbon of gray flanked by green trees and yellow light. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Mark hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. I kept both hands on the wheel, eyes scanning the road, pretending I didn't notice the silence next to me. That had always been our arrangement. He brooded, I balanced. From the rearview mirror, I caught his reflection, jaw tight, brows low, watching the red canvas bag nestled between the cooler and Emma's duffel like it might leap up and confess something. He finally spoke. "Did your mom hand it to you directly?" His voice startled me more than the question. "Yeah," I said. "She popped the trunk." I grabbed it. "Why, I don't know," he said, not looking at me. "You didn't think to ask what was inside?" I bristled. "No." Should I have? Mark leaned back in his seat. The belt of sunlight from the windshield hit his cheekbones sharp like suspicion. I hated that look. The one that made me feel like I'd missed something obvious. "I didn't think it mattered," I added, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Right," he said flatly. I focused on the road. Birds swept over the trees on the right. The hum of tires on asphalt filled the space between us. The bag sat quietly, betraying nothing. Once years ago, Mom asked me to meet someone on Greg's behalf. It was a man in a wrinkled blazer with cigarette fingers who handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Tell your brother this covers this week, but next time I want him here." I hadn't asked questions then either. Only later did I find out it was a loan repayment. Greg's loan. My reputation. Just needed someone reliable, Mom had said almost proudly. Someone they'd take seriously. I shook the memory away like smoke. Behind me, Sophie squealed at a spilled juice pouch. Emma groaned. Jake yelled, "Gross!" I handed back some napkins without turning. "Wipe it up, please." Mark still hadn't touched the breakfast sandwich I handed him at the start of the drive. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 3 more hours until the border. The party wasn't until tomorrow, but Mom had insisted we get settled early. I suspected she wanted an extra day to rehearse whatever version of perfection she planned to perform. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A message from Mom lit up the screen. "Drive safe, darling. So excited to see you all. That bag means a lot to us, okay? Hugs." Mark saw it too. He didn't say anything, but his mouth twitched like he was biting down on something bitter. I sighed, turning the phone face down. "She just meant I started?" "She said the bag means a lot," he interrupted. "It's probably sentimental. You know how she is." "No," he said. "I really don't." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The trees blurred past. The sky stretched innocent and endless. It was the kind of morning that pretended everything was fine. Then, just as we crossed an overpass, Mark spoke again. This time, his tone left no room for negotiation. "We're not taking that bag across the border." The words dropped between us like a stone in still water. I turned, eyebrows raised, a small laugh slipping out before I could help it. "You're joking, right?" Mark didn't answer. "Turn the car around. Now." It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was certainty. My hands stiffened on the wheel. We were 5 minutes from the border. The bridge loomed ahead, a graceful arc rising from the earth like a promise or a trap. Signs for Rainbow Bridge crossing, 2.5 miles past us in bold white letters. What I asked, but it was a reflex. I'd heard him. I just didn't understand. Mark didn't flinch. "Take the exit." "That one." He pointed to the right toward a slim, barely marked road that split from the highway like an afterthought. My pulse quickened. The kids were asleep in the back. Emma with her head against the window. Jake slumped with his mouth open. Sophie curled up with her blanket. The car was quiet except for the rhythmic bump of tires over pavement seams. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was the tone in Mark's voice. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't the kind to panic, or the way his eyes stayed locked on the rearview mirror like he was watching something I couldn't see. I switched on my signal. The tires thudded as we exited the car, veering onto a narrower road lined with scrubby trees and old concrete dividers. We left the smooth predictability of the highway behind. Mark let out a slow breath, almost a release. The silence between us shifted. No longer cold, just loaded. Okay, I said finally. We're off the highway. Now what? Mark didn't answer immediately. He rubbed the bridge of his nose like he was trying to wake up from something. I don't know, he said. I just knew we couldn't go forward. That's not an answer, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Do you think there's something illegal in that bag I think I don't want to find out at a customs checkpoint? He replied. My grip on the steering wheel tightened again. I slowed the car as the road narrowed further, winding into a forgotten pocket of town, vacant lots, silent warehouses, a place untouched by the morning sun. Behind us, no one followed. No sirens, no patrol cars, no explanation. Mark leaned back in his seat and finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, not scared, just resolved. I didn't see anything, he said. I felt it. Something in me trembled. There was a memory, one I'd buried deep, of a moment years ago when I'd ignored that same kind of instinct. I had raised a concern about Greg's sudden new business partner, and Mom had looked me dead in the eye and said, Claire, you really need to stop being so suspicious. Not everything is a crisis. So I'd apologized. I'd swallowed the doubt and taken Greg's word. 2 weeks later, his apartment was raided. He walked free. I paid the lawyer. I don't know what's in that bag, I said quietly. Mark nodded. But we're not going to be the ones to find out. The kids stirred behind us. Sophie mumbled something and turned in her seat, still mostly asleep. We reached a dead end. There was a cracked parking lot to the right leading to an abandoned gas station. I pulled in and turned off the engine. Silence. The red canvas bag sat in the back just as it had before. But something had changed. Not in the bag. In me. I looked at it through the rearview mirror. Claire looked at the red canvas bag in the rearview mirror. For the first time, it didn't look like a bag at all. It looked like danger. I didn't panic. Not yet. That comes later. First came the heaviness, the knowing. The gravel crackled beneath our tires as I pulled into the clearing. No road signs, no houses. Just a wide patch of sun-scorched dirt surrounded by whispering pines and buzzing cicadas. It felt like nowhere. And for once, nowhere was exactly where I wanted to be. Mark stepped out first, scanning the empty tree line like a soldier checking for snipers. His eyes weren't frantic, just sharp, the kind of still alertness that told me he'd already made up his mind. I opened the rear door slowly. The red canvas bag sat wedged between the cooler and Emma's beach towel, as unassuming as ever. I grabbed it with both hands and felt it heavier than a few scarves, and snacks had any right to be. I joined Mark near the edge of the clearing. He didn't speak. He just reached for the bag, unzipped it with careful, deliberate fingers, and peeled back the flap. A pale blue sweater came out first, folded neatly, as if Evelyn herself had pressed it that morning. Then a polka-dotted scarf. Then a paperback novel. And then, nestled between layers of deceptive normalcy, a gallon-sized Ziploc bag. Inside it, tightly wrapped plastic bundles, opaque and rubbery-looking, about the size of fists. I didn't need to be a chemist. I didn't even need to ask. My body knew before my brain caught up. Mark didn't look at me. He just held the bag up slightly, letting the sunlight catch the seams. That's not protein powder, he said. I could hear my breath. It came in short, sharp pulls. My chest wasn't rising right. I stepped back. They put this in the car. With our kids. Mark finally looked over. They weren't trying to hurt us, he said, and his voice wasn't angry. They just didn't care if it happened. I said nothing. My tongue was thick in my mouth. The Ziploc glinted under the sun a little like a mirror, and I could see a reflection of my own face, stunned, pale, older than it should be. Somewhere, a bird chirped. The breeze picked up hot and hollow. A memory surfaced years ago when I was 25. I accidentally opened a sealed envelope on the kitchen table. I thought it was one of mine. Inside, a second mortgage notice overdue. I'd walked it to my mother, concerned. She hadn't thanked me. She hadn't explained. She'd called me nosy. "This is why people don't trust you, Claire." I didn't yell now. I didn't crumble. I stood there with the same frozen stillness I'd learned that day. I wasn't the helper. I wasn't the protector. I was the pawn. "They used me," I said finally, though it didn't feel like a revelation. It felt like an old bruise coming up to the surface. Mark nodded gently, placing the Ziploc back in the red canvas. He zipped the bag closed and held it with the tips of his fingers like it was radioactive. There was no dramatics, no wailing, no accusations. Just a strange kind of quiet, the quiet of a woman watching her trust rot in the sun. I thought of my mother's voice on the phone, syrupy soft. "Just one small favor, honey." I could hear it now, like it was echoing off the trees. We stood there for what felt like 10 minutes. Maybe more. I didn't check the time. The bag sat at Mark's feet like a loaded gun, and in my mind I was replaying every Sunday dinner, every passive compliment, every time I was called the steady one. Steady. Predictable. Convenient. "They picked me," I said softly, "because they knew I wouldn't ask." Mark didn't answer right away. He looked at me then, not with pity, not with judgment, just clarity, as if he finally saw something I'd buried long ago. He took a step forward and said it like a suggestion, not a command. "Let's return it." Quietly. We drove in silence, not because there was nothing to say, because too much had already been said, and none of it was true. The road stretched ahead like a ribbon that had unraveled too far, curling into the unknown. Tree shadows flickered across the dashboard. The children had fallen asleep in the back, their soft rhythmic breathing a strange comfort in the middle of my unraveling. I kept both hands on the wheel, but my knuckles were white. My wrists trembled now and then, not from fear, but from the effort of staying calm. The kind of calm that comes after the earthquake, when the furniture's still standing but nothing feels secure anymore. Mark sat beside me. Still, steady, not pushing. At the last red light before the highway widened, he reached over and rested his hand lightly on my shoulder. Not to steer me, just to remind me I was there. "They picked me because I always say yes," I said barely above a whisper. The words surprised me. I hadn't meant to speak them aloud. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I thought back to the dozens of favors that had trickled through the years. Picking up Greg from a bar 2 towns over when no one else answered. Driving my father's friend, a man I'd never met, to a VA appointment in the middle of a workday. Babysitting Heather's daughter for an entire week while she and her husband vacationed in Bermuda. None of it was presented as a demand. Always just "Claire, you're so reliable." And like a fool, I'd worn that word like a badge. "They knew I wouldn't look inside," I said again, this time louder. Mark nodded once. "They bet on your kindness?" There it was. The sentence I hadn't dared to think. They gambled with me, with us. And they never even flinched. The sun dipped lower, turning the clouds soft orange. A hawk glided overhead, scanning the trees. My gaze returned to the road, the kind of 2-lane stretch that forces you to focus, to keep moving forward even when your mind is trying to look back. "We're not going back to that reunion," I said, steady now. Mark turned toward me. I didn't look at him when I added, "We're going back to ourselves." For the first time that day, I heard him exhale like he meant it, the sound of relief, of agreement. We passed a faded green sign for a rest stop, and I considered pulling over. Not for the bathroom, for breath, for perspective. But I kept driving. I wasn't ready to stop. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. Then again. 14 missed calls, all from Mom. The name glowed against the glass like a flare, bright, insistent, utterly predictable. I didn't answer. Not yet. You can return a sweater. You can return a wrong-size gift. But how do you return betrayal? The parking lot behind Turner's Grocery was nearly empty. One flickering light bulb buzzed overhead, casting long shadows between the rows of faded white lines. Mark stayed in the car, engine idling low, the kids asleep in the back. I stood alone under the yellow glow, the red canvas bag gripped in my hand, like it might squirm away. Harold arrived exactly 4 minutes after I sent the text, "Forgot something. Meet me behind Turner's." He didn't park in a space, just pulled up alongside window cracked halfway. I watched him for a second before he climbed out, slow and deliberate, like a man used to being in control. "Claire," he said, not quite warm, not quite cold. I didn't bother with small talk. I held the bag out in front of me. "You forgot this." He looked at it, then at me. "You opened it." It wasn't a question. He was gauging, testing. I nodded. "I did." And then I closed it again. A flicker of tension crossed his face. His mouth twitched like it wanted to form a lie but couldn't decide on the shape. I didn't move. He stepped forward and reached out, grabbing the strap a little too quickly, like the bag might vanish if he hesitated. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "I was driving my children across a national border with a package I didn't inspect because I was too busy being reliable, Claire." I kept my tone even. "So I'm correcting that mistake." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "I'm not the warehouse clerk of this family anymore." There was no scream, no drama, just the kind of quiet that echoes louder than any fight. His fingers tightened around the strap. "You don't understand what's at stake." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't I?" He shifted, jaw clenched. "You do this. You hurt your mother." That word again. Mother. Like Evelyn was some fragile saint whose world would collapse under the weight of consequences. I didn't answer. I turned, walked away, and left the words hanging there like unpaid debts, like unopened letters, like a daughter no longer playing her part. Mark was still in the driver's seat when I got in. He looked at me, waiting. "It's done," I said. And for the first time since we pulled off the road that morning, my hands didn't tremble. The messages came in bursts, like bombs dropped one at a time, each more desperate than the last. The bedroom was dim lit only by the soft amber from the lamp beside my bed. The sound of running water came faintly from the bathroom Mark was showering. The kids had long since fallen asleep. It was late, too late to call anyone, which is probably why she'd chosen to leave messages instead. I hadn't listened all day. Now I did. I picked up the phone and pressed play. Voicemail. 1:10:03 a.m. Claire. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you. You didn't come to the reunion and everyone's asking. I'm worried. Just call me okay, soft. Sweet. Concerned. The warm-up act." Voicemail. 2:12:47 p.m. "Well, I just think it's very unfair of you to make a scene like this. We asked for a simple favor. You said yes. You didn't ask what was in the bag at the time, did you? Don't act like we tricked you." More edge, still wrapped in sugar. Voicemail 3:1:15 p.m. "I don't understand where this hostility is coming from. Ever since you were little, you always had this flair for drama. I remember when you cried for days just because we missed that art show of yours." There it was, the rewrite. The gentle reframing of memory into shame. Voicemail 4:2:21 p.m. "If something happens to your father because of this, if his blood pressure spikes, you'll have to live with that. Do you even think about anyone but yourself?" Now she was unraveling. Voicemail 5:3:40 p.m. "Maybe you're punishing me. Maybe this is your way of getting back at us for, I don't know, for raising you too well, for having expectations. That's not a crime, Claire. The classic spin. The noble victim." Voicemail 6:12 p.m. "I haven't eaten all day. My stomach is in knots. I can't stop crying. Is that what you wanted?" That voice, hoarse, high, breathy, it cracked in places that weren't entirely real. Voicemail 7:58 p.m. If something happens to me, if my heart gives out, if I collapse from stress, just remember, Claire, you did this. I sat very still. Not a word came out of me. No curse, no cry, no sigh. I just sat. Then I did two things. First, I saved the voicemails, all 7, and backed them up to my private drive. Then I opened the voice memo app on my phone and pressed record. I didn't say anything, not yet. I just let the silence breathe into the mic. Proof of presence, of clarity. The bathroom door opened with a low creak. Mark stepped into the doorway, towel around his shoulders, hair damp and dark. "You're still up?" he asked. I looked at him, my phone still recording, my hands steady. "I'm keeping a record," I said. His brow furrowed. "Of what?" "Of the truth," I said. "Before it gets edited again?" He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He walked over and sat beside me. Our shoulders touched. And for a long time we didn't say a thing, because too much had already been said, and none of it had been true. Some truths are easier written than said, especially to someone who spent their life not listening. The morning air was sharp, clear. A faint breeze stirred the potted basil beside me. From my balcony, I could hear a few birds, a dog barking blocks away, and the low hum of traffic heading somewhere more urgent than this stillness. I sipped my coffee, legs curled beneath me, and set pen to paper. It was an old-fashioned habit. Mark teased me for still owning stationery, but this letter wasn't for someone who used email. It was for Lorraine. Not to be sent, to be written. That was the point. Dear Lorraine, you always thought I was distant, that I held back, that I liked to keep things bottled up. You said I made things harder than they had to be, like feelings were a code you didn't have time to crack. Maybe I did hold back. Maybe that was the only way to stay close to someone who never actually looked at me. You and I, we never fought. Never had screaming matches or slamming doors. We had polite, strategic silence. The kind that says, "We're fine," as long as no one speaks honestly. Well, here's honesty. A few days ago, Mom handed me a red bag. No instructions, no warning. Just said it was vitamins for Uncle Ray and asked me to bring it to the reunion. She smiled. I said yes. I didn't look inside. Mark did. And what we found wasn't vitamins. It wasn't anything legal. You know what's worse. Not that they used me, it's that I wasn't surprised. That's the problem with low expectations. They protect you, but they also bury you. We turned the car around before the border. Mark said it felt wrong. I didn't argue. That might be the most radical act of love I've ever done, trusting someone who actually trusts me back. I gave the bag back. To Harold. He didn't thank me. Mom left 7 voicemails, each one dripping in sugar and blame. I saved them all. But that's not why I'm writing. I'm writing because I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. Not in the way you'd recognize. This isn't rage or revenge, it's release. You don't owe me an apology. I just don't owe you silence anymore. I hope you're well. I hope the reunion was everything Mom planned. I hope you enjoyed the matching t-shirts. But I won't be coming next year. Or the one after. I'm learning how to be someone who doesn't wait to be seen. Sincerely, Claire, the girl you used to call too sensitive. P.S. She's gone. I signed the last line with a small curl of satisfaction. No flourish, no dramatics, just closure. I folded the letter once, then again. I didn't seal it. Didn't need to. The power wasn't in the sending, it was in the writing. I stood stretched and walked back inside. My printer was humming, flashing its usual low paper alert. I opened the tray to refill it, and there, nestled between blank sheets and receipts, was something I hadn't seen in years. A scanned copy of my birth certificate. Name Claire Morgan. Mother, Evelyn Morgan. Father, Harold Morgan. I stared at it for a moment, then let out a quiet breath. Not a laugh. Not quite something softer. Of course they kept it. Of course they scanned it. Of course they would need to prove I belonged, when it was never really about belonging. I slid it back in without printing anything. There was nothing left to prove. The phone rang at 6:17 a.m. I knew the time because I was already awake. I sat in the dark in the same armchair I'd curled into last night after putting the kids to bed. The house was still no cartoons, no coffee brewing, no sounds from upstairs. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft creak of this chair whenever I shifted. The sunrise hadn't broken through yet, but I could see the faint outline of the trees from the window. Mark was still asleep. I hadn't joined him. I wasn't brooding. I wasn't crying. I was waiting. For what I didn't know. Then the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, area code 7116, Buffalo, New York. I picked up on the third ring. Hello. A pause. Then a firm, clipped voice. Is this Claire Morgan? Yes. This is Officer Melanie Harper with the U.S. Border Patrol Peace Bridge Station. I didn't move. Just pressed the phone harder to my ear. We're contacting you because you're listed as a next of kin on a customs declaration form submitted last week by Evelyn Morgan and Harold Morgan. My parents. Correct. They were detained this morning at approximately 5:40 a.m. for attempting to cross into Canada with undeclared substances. The material has been confirmed as a schedule. I-controlled substance. They're currently in custody. I swallowed. My voice came out even. Were they carrying luggage? Yes. A red duffel bag among other items. I closed my eyes. Do you require me to come in? Not at this point, ma'am. We're just informing you as protocol. You may be contacted by legal counsel depending on next steps. I understand. Have a good morning. The line went dead. I sat still, the phone heavy in my hand. The sun hadn't risen yet, but something had broken open inside me, not shock, not grief. Just confirmation. The silence of being right. At 6:29 a.m. it rang again. Greg. I let it buzz twice before picking up. Claire. Have you heard? Yes. You. Did you tell them anything? Did you say something? What the hell happened? I could hear the panic in his voice. Not worry for our parents. Worry for himself. For fallout. For exposure. I stood and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. Still no light in the neighbors' homes. I didn't say anything. I said calmly. They spoke with their actions. There was silence on the other end. A long one. Then the line cut. No goodbye. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before setting the phone down on the windowsill. It buzzed again almost instantly, but this time, not a call. An email. No subject. No signature. Just a video attachment. The sender address was a scrambled mess of letters and numbers. One of those temporary accounts people use when they don't want to be traced. I hesitated, then tapped the file. The footage was grainy, security cam style. A timestamp in the corner, 5:42 a.m. The screen showed the interior of a customs checkpoint. I saw Harold, upright, rigid, trying to talk his way through something. Evelyn stood behind him, arms crossed, lips tight, in a line that used to mean, "Don't embarrass me." Two officers flanked them. Then the red bag came into view. Set on the table. An officer unzipped it. I knew what came next. What I didn't expect was the look on Evelyn's face, not fear, not guilt. Annoyance. As if this were a mild inconvenience. A delayed flight. A rude waiter. A mistake someone else would fix for her. Then the video cut off. No sound, no explanations. Just that moment, a bag opened, a woman unmoved. I didn't forward the clip. I didn't reply. I just saved it. There was a time I'd have dropped everything to help. That time is over. The office was unusually quiet for a Monday. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead, the kind of sterile glow that makes even paper feel colder. My team hadn't arrived yet. I'd come early not to escape, just to anchor myself somewhere that didn't reek of emotional blackmail. At 8:04 a.m., my laptop pinged with a video call request. Greg. I clicked decline. It rang again. Then again. By the fourth try, I answered, not out of courtesy but to look him in the eye. His face popped up on screen. Jaw tight. Eyes red-rimmed, not from crying but from not sleeping. Behind him, a bland apartment wall and the distinct echo of someone pacing nearby. "Claire," he said. "Greg. You saw the news? I saw the email?" He blinked. He hadn't expected that. "They weren't trying to involve you," he began. They trusted you. They knew you'd handle things." "Exactly." He paused. "They trusted that I wouldn't check the bag. That I'd obey. That I'd play my part." "Claire, they were scared." Dad said, "Stop. You're not here to quote them. You're here to see if I'll clean up another one of your family's messes." That landed. His lips pressed into a thin line. "So what's your plan?" I looked straight at the camera. "My plan is to put on a good outfit, eat a normal lunch, do my work with integrity, and let the law do what it was designed to do." He leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "If they go to prison, do you want that on your conscience?" "Greg, I carried this family's conscience for 30 years. You think it's light? You think it comes off clean? If I help them now, it's not out of mercy. It's because I still want to be useful. And I don't." He stared at me. For the first time in our lives, Greg didn't know what to say. This wasn't the version of me who drove him to his job interviews, who helped him rewrite scholarship essays, who sat silent every time he got the credit for being the responsible one. That sister was dead. This one was very much alive. "You'll regret this," he said finally. My smile was small, not bitter, just resolved. If they go to prison, that's justice. If I save them, that's betrayal. Of myself. The screen flickered. He didn't hang up, he just didn't know how to stay. I ended the call for him. If they taught me anything, it was how to gather evidence and pretend not to. I didn't realize how quiet our apartment was until the only sound left was the soft whir of my laptop fan. The kids had gone to bed hours ago. Mark was in the kitchen steeping tea like he did when he sensed something was shifting in me and knew better than to interrupt it. I plugged in the USB, no music, no distractions. Just a folder named For Review. It was time. Inside were 7 labeled subfolders: voicemails, Evelyn's emotional blackmail, neatly trimmed, time-stamped, unedited. Photos. The red bag. Its contents. The Ziploc pouch that sat beneath my daughter's travel pillow for over 2 hours. Documents. My birth certificate. Greg's old emails about handling favors. Notes Harold had scribbled about delays at crossings. Call logs. Screenshot proof of 14 missed calls. 3 from Mom, the rest from private. Video. The arrest footage. Peace Bridge, 5:42 a.m. Their faces pixelated but clear enough. I opened a blank email. To countydistrict.legaldesk.egovmail.us, subject incident related to Evelyn and Harold Duncan, attachment. Full evidence filed.zip. I typed slowly, carefully. Dear Counsel. This is not an act of revenge. This is record keeping. What's attached is everything I have regarding my unknowing involvement in a transport of illegal substances orchestrated by Evelyn and Harold Duncan, my parents. I am a cooperating witness, not a conspirator. Please review and advise if further steps are needed. Sincerely, Claire Duncan. Before I hit send, I sat back, looked at the screen. I remembered something Evelyn used to say when we were kids and played make-believe courtroom. Say it softly and no one's guilty. They built a family on whispered wrongs and unspoken rules. But I had the volume up now. Mark walked in just as I pressed send. He didn't ask what I'd done. He set a warm mug of chamomile by my elbow and sat next to me. His hand found mine steady. I didn't know how heavy it was until I let it go. I whispered, "You're not letting go. You're filing it in the right drawer," he said. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. From ADA Marcus Lynn Subject RE Incident, related to Evelyn and Harold Duncan, Ms. Duncan received. We will use this exactly as it should be used. Your role is noted and your clarity appreciated. Monsieur Lynn, I read it twice. I didn't feel triumphant. Just aligned. For the first time in months, maybe years. The truth didn't need shouting. It just needed filing. It's one thing to suspect. It's another to see your suspicions in 4K. I didn't rush to open the file. The email had been sitting in my inbox for 2 days. Mark hadn't asked about it, but I knew he saw the subject line. Video evidence, Peace Bridge footage. I'd hovered over the link more times than I could count. But that morning, with the sunlight hitting the hardwood just right, and the kids still at school, I clicked. Full screen. The dashboard cam came first, timestamped unblinking. The kind of angle that doesn't lie. The kind that doesn't let anyone pose. Harold was driving. Evelyn sat rigid in the passenger seat, arms crossed tight, lips thin. She didn't speak at first, but you could see her eyes darting to the rearview mirror, then down at something in her lap. Red. Familiar. The bag. When the border officer approached, Harold put on that voice, the one he used when talking to bank clerks or valet staff. Polite, authoritative fake. "Yes, sir. Just my wife and I. Nothing to declare. Routine." The officer asked them to step out. Evelyn didn't move. Let them do their job. Harold muttered low but picked up by the mic. "What if they open it?" she whispered. He snapped. "Then let them. It's Claire's bag. There's nothing in it. My name." Dropped like a shield. The second camera switched angles, a wide shot from the side of the checkpoint. Harold gestured at the trunk as the officer pulled it open. The red tote was there, right on top. He said it again, louder this time. "It belongs to my daughter. Check it if you want." Evelyn's eyes were fixed ahead. She didn't blink, didn't even flinch as the zipper was pulled. The officer reached in, pulled out a transparent Ziploc bag, sealed. Something powdery, labeled in code. "Sir, can you explain this?" Harold stuttered, then froze. They said, that's not." But Evelyn still said nothing. Not to the officer, not to Harold, not to the camera. Just turned her face to the side, away. As if all of it, the bag, the lie, the risk didn't concern her anymore. I paused the video. They never looked at each other, even when caught. I stared at the screen for a long time, but not at their faces. My eyes kept falling on that red tote. I'd carried it through airport gates, grocery lines, carpool runs. I remembered wiping crayon marks off its handles. Now it sat on a customs table like Exhibit A. I didn't feel angry, not anymore. And I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. Just a low, hollow thrum in my chest. Something final. Behind me, I heard the door creak open. Mark didn't say a word. He took one look at the frozen image on the screen, then at me. "I don't need to wonder if they were wrong anymore," I said softly. "They proved it for me." He nodded. Didn't try to comfort me. He knew this wasn't a moment for that. I minimized the window, shut the laptop, breathed. There's a silence that comes not from emptiness but from clarity. I was there. You can't have a family meeting when there's no longer a family. They chose a quiet cafe on Monroe and 7th. Neutral ground, as if anything between us could still be neutral. I arrived 7 minutes late. On purpose. Greg and Lorraine were already seated across from each other, not beside. That alone told me plenty. Greg was hunched forward, fingers drumming against his coffee cup. Lorraine sat upright, expression clipped, but her jaw tightened the moment she saw me. I didn't apologize for being late. I didn't even sit down right away. Just stood for a second watching them. "You came," Greg said, as if it were a victory. "Don't read into it," I replied, then pulled the chair back with deliberate care and sat down. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to tempt someone into breaking it. Greg, as expected, cracked first. "Look, this doesn't have to be messy. We all want the same thing here." I raised one eyebrow. "Do we?" He pushed ahead. "This family's been under a lot of stress. Mom and Dad didn't plan for this." "No," I cut in. "They planned around it." "There's a difference." Lorraine interjected, voice soft but sharp. "Claire, you've always been sensitive. No one's denying that things weren't perfect. But cutting us off going to lawyers?" I smiled faintly. "Funny. I thought I was finally behaving like one of you." Greg sighed. "Can we not make this a courtroom?" I reached into my bag, pulled out a manila envelope, laid it gently on the table. "No need. The documents already speak for themselves." Lorraine's eyes flicked to it. "What is that certified copy of the preliminary charges against Mom and Dad, accompanied by digital evidence submitted to the Attorney General's office, voicemails, photos, witness statements, email trails?" Greg's mouth parted like he wanted to object, but couldn't find the first word. I looked directly at Lorraine. "You once told me I was always hurt by everything, that I needed to toughen up." Then at Greg. "You said I made things bigger than they were." They didn't speak. I leaned back, calm, steady, letting the silence settle like dust on furniture no one touched anymore. "You wanted a meeting. This is it. Closure." Greg finally found his voice. "So that's it. You just erase us." "I'm not erasing anything," I said, standing. "I'm acknowledging what's already gone." I slid the envelope across the table. "Keep it, read it, burn it." "Doesn't matter." Lorraine shook her head, voice trembling now. "You're really going through with this?" "Yes." I looked at both of them, gaze level. "Because family isn't a life sentence. I've served my term." I turned to leave. Greg stood. "Claire." "Wait." I didn't. But just before I reached the door, I said, without looking back, "From now on, you two can call each other blood. I no longer need to. Sometimes justice isn't dramatic. It's just a document filed at 4:56 p.m. The sun had dipped just enough to cast long shadows across the grass. My son ran ahead of me, all legs and laughter, chasing invisible dragons with a stick he insisted was a sword. The park was dotted with weekend families, strollers, snacks, someone playing acoustic guitar too close to the water fountain. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row, then one long vibration. I reached for it without thinking, thumb already swiping before I registered the sender. Subject: State v. Evelyn and Harold Ainsworth. Sentencing notification time. 4:56 p.m. I stopped walking. The email wasn't long. Just a few lines in neutral legal language, the kind meant to record, not to provoke. Harold and Evelyn Ainsworth had been sentenced to 4 years in prison. 2 years of that were suspended pending good behavior. The remaining time would be served under close supervision with regular reporting and mandatory rehabilitation coursework. I read it once, then again. There was no explosion in my chest. No surge of triumph. No vindication. Just air. This was how it ended, not in a courtroom speech, not with someone confessing or collapsing or begging. Just a timestamp, a judgment, and a quiet buzz in my palm. My son had paused near a swing set, looking back. "Mom, come push me?" I smiled. Not wide. Not forced. Just enough. "Coming," I called out. But first, I tapped the trash icon, deleted the email. No forwarding, no printing, no screenshot. There was no need to archive freedom. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and walked toward the swings. He was already climbing into the seat legs dangling. I cupped his small hands in mine, adjusted the straps. "You ready?" I asked. He nodded, eyes bright. "Push me high," I did. The air was crisp clean. He giggled, hair whipping back as I pushed, then caught him again, the rhythm steady, like breath. When he slowed, I leaned in and asked, "Ice cream?" He beamed. "Chocolate double," I said, "with sprinkles." His eyes widened like I'd handed him the moon. We started walking toward the small shop near the park gate. Halfway there, a woman passed us, young, polished, with a camera in hand. Her daughter, maybe 5, posed awkwardly by the bench while the woman knelt and snapped photos. "Okay, now smile for Grandma." I watched them for a moment, then kept walking. Not jealous, not bitter, just aware. What I had now was not loud or perfect or traditional, but it was mine, built choice by choice, word by word, silence by silence. At the corner, my son tugged at my sleeve. "Can I have gummy bears on top too?" I laughed. "Kiddo, today, you can have whatever you want." I used to be afraid I'd become like her. Now I'm not even in the same story. The night air slipped in through the cracked window, cool and unbothered. My glass of wine sat on the nightstand half full, its surface reflecting the soft glow of the desk lamp. There was no noise in the apartment. Not from the hallway. Not from my own thoughts. I sat with my journal open, pen resting against the edge like it too was hesitant. On the first page I wrote, "I am my mother's daughter." I paused. Then underneath it, "But I'm not her echo." The words didn't feel sharp. They didn't need to. They felt settled. Grounded. I remembered the way she used to say, "I live for my children," always with a tone of exhaustion, like we were burdens she carried instead of choices she made. I used to twist myself into knots, trying not to become her, afraid that any sign of impatience or fatigue meant I was slipping. But I wasn't. I had simply learned how not to scream. I flipped to a new page. Started again. Today my son laughed a lot. I didn't raise my voice once. It wasn't a declaration, just a record. I thought about how many times I'd tried to write entries about her, about what she'd done, what she'd failed to do. Pages full of questions and bitterness and reasons. All of it exhausted me. Tonight I didn't want to explain her anymore. I didn't want to fight her in my head or defend myself to ghosts. I wanted to live in a sentence that didn't include her. So I wrote, "I made grilled cheese with tomato soup." He said it was better than McDonald's. I'll take the win. A smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. Not because it was perfect, because it was mine. I closed the notebook slowly. "I'm not a victim anymore," I whispered to the quiet. Not a hero either. Just someone who walked through a storm and kept walking. I stood, turned off the lamp. The room dimmed, but I didn't pull the curtains shut. For the first time in a long time, I let the moonlight come in. I let it touch my face, my shoulders, the open pages on my desk. I had nothing left to hide. No more battles to replay. No more approval to chase. No more apologies to offer for surviving in a way that looked different from what she would have wanted. I walked to the window and looked out. The street was still. A cat darted between trash bins. A porch light flickered across the way. I raised my wine glass, not in toast, but in acknowledgement. To the woman I used to fear becoming, and to the woman I became instead. They tried to bury her beneath years of blame, silence, and carefully crafted lies. But when the dust settled, truth stood taller than any reputation built on fear. Justice didn't arrive with sirens or rage. It came through records, resolve, and a refusal to stay silent. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Because when one woman dares to confront the roots of betrayal, she doesn't just rewrite her story, she ends the cycle. If this story spoke to you, like, share and comment below. Comment 1 if you've ever had to fight for your own voice. Comment 2 if you feel something still unresolved.